It's 2 o'clock time now for Inside the Courtroom, the Senzo Meyiwa Murder Trial Wrap. I'm Linda Mnisi. It's always a pleasure to have you with us this beautiful Sunday afternoon. We're coming to you live from our Randburg studios. All right, as always, so you know we start the show with the poll question, and this week we're asking whether you think the alleged confession statement of the alleged intruder, Bongani Ntanzi, will withstand scrutiny. Those options are on your screen. Yes, there is no other alternative. 2, know that too many inconsistencies, and 3, you're waiting for the end of the trial. Make sure you scan the QR code on your screen right now and start voting. Those votes, you know, will be, of course, announced at the later part or later in the show. So make sure that you scan that QR code and you start voting. But you can also get in touch with us via our WhatsApp line to contribute to the conversations that we'll be having in studio. So if you have any questions, queries, then you can send them through and I'll put them to our guests, and those messages will be read live on air. All right, so this week, the state turned its attention to the alleged confession statements of the alleged intruder of the Khumalo home, that's Bongani Ntanzi. Now, you'd recall that it's the state's version that Ntanzi implicated himself in the murder of football star Senzo Meyiwa as one of the alleged intruders of the Khumalo home. Now, it's Ntanzi's version, however, that he was coerced through assault to sign what was an already compiled confession statement, meaning the statement does not pass the legal test of deposing a confession freely, voluntarily, and without undue influence. Now, Ntanzi's first alleged confession statement was deposed on the 19th of June 2020. That's 3 days after his arrest. Now, according to the state, the statement were deposed before, or the statement rather, was deposed before Colonel Rapadu at the Morocco police station that is in Soweto. Now, Ntanzi, however, says the statements were signed at one of the assault locations.
Said you gave these documents to Colonel Rapadu, and that is when accused 2 was forced to sign those documents. Then at line 22, there were documents or there were pages that were not stamped with his stamp. As a result, they were completed at Morocco police station.
Well, the documents that I was given, I signed them at that spot. What they did, they just untied one of the handcuff and I fixed my thumbprint.
So you distancing yourself from this proposition?
My lord, I signed everything at the field.
Now, as usual, we have our guests to help us unpack the proceedings for this past week, and I'm joined this time via our video link by Itumukwena, who you all know as a commentator following these proceedings very closely, and we also have Melusikulu, who is a legal analyst. Thank you very much to the both of you for joining us this afternoon. Let me start with you, Itu. As somebody who follows this case, obviously one of the things that we were anticipating was the testimony around the confession statements, but the allegations of assault take center stage because they're important in whether or not, right at the end of the trial, the court will accept these confession statements.
I'm back, Marakohaye. I'm back, Kuposkateinelo. Thank you very much, Missy, for having me back. Of course, the confessions have been anticipated and the torture was going to be touched on, and obviously the injuries sustained from the torture. We have seen inconsistencies from Ntanzi when we look at what he said in the trial, within the trial, and what he then said when he was led by Mr. Ramusipela now in the main trial. But I think it was quite interesting because Baloyi actually referred to the doctor that actually assisted Ntanzi to see if he had a gold tooth or not. And in his evidence, he did confirm that he did not see any sign of trauma. He did not see any sign of torture. If he had been tortured in the last 3 or 2 days, he would have been able to see it. And the fact that the defense totally forgot this evidence and objected to the fact that the doctor never mentioned anything about trauma, but the doctor was actually cross-examined on the trauma and the torture by Mr. Munisi and Shololo, and he was also led on the trauma. So as it stands, the doctor has said that there were no signs of trauma, no signs of torture. So I'm not sure how Ntanzi is going to be able to rebut that objective evidence.
Yeah, I want to stick with you, Itu, because one of the other key things that aligns with the allegations of torture is the AVL, where the vehicle that transported Bongani Ntanzi was traveling in, right? Talk to us about that evidence this past week, because during the trial within a trial, we saw Bongani Ntanzi suffer a number of blows in terms of his version and what the AVL report said.
I think the introduction of the AVL evidence, Linda, has been quite interesting because if you remember, the AVL was introduced during Mohane's cross-examination. And by that time, a few witnesses from the state had already been cross-examined or had already been led. And the date of the torture that was put to these witnesses was the 19th of June. Yet when we finally got the AVL evidence, Ntanzi was able to alter his evidence and say that he was actually tortured on the 18th. So that created a bit of a problem for him because initially, Mr. Ngomezulu had been cross-examining witnesses on the 19th, and he was putting areas where the AVL didn't go. So when they went to the AVL and actually checked that the metal plant that you're talking about, where you were saying you were tortured, or the recycling plant that you're saying you were tortured, they are not appearing on the AVL. So it doesn't make it possible for you to have actually gone to these places. We are seeing at the 18th of June, the car goes to Engine in Grey Avenue, Alberton, not Heidelberg Road, as Mr. Ngomezulu had originally said. So Ntanzi has a lot of issues in terms of proving his allegations, but AVL is saying, no, we were not there.
Yeah, let me bring you in, Melusi Xulu, as our legal analyst. I mean, if you're going to allege assault and you have the AVL report, which is basically the GPS of the vehicle that was transporting, you're saying that at the places, for example, the Barra Hospital, where he alleged the car went into, and some of the other areas in Orlando, the vehicle clearly stipulates, or the GPS clearly stipulates, that it did not stop there. Obviously, it will be seen as a blow to Bongani Ntanzi, but now he's in the main trial and gets to really elaborate on what he meant around those allegations.
Yeah, good afternoon to Nisi and to Itu and to the viewers at home. I think what is important in any case, what you say must be able to be proven. As much as you are the accused, there is evidence against you that must be proven beyond reasonable doubt. But when you are in a witness stand, whatever you say or allege, at least there must be a proof that it goes with the evidence. For example, if the car did stop somewhere, it must be shown on the AVL. And the other issue is, at the end of the day, I know the confession or confessions are being brought back again, but we've already dealt with that in the trial, and it was proven that they can be used as evidence or they are admissible. And also the issue about assault. If you say you were assaulted, but the doctor says there's no proof of any injury or trauma, then it becomes a problem, because remember, for a confession to be admissible, you must have been in your sober senses, you must have made it without being forced, and it must be proven that you made it voluntarily. So that is why the court in the trial believed that statement was made properly. So now the issue is, yes, he has to come back on a stand and state his case. But even if he's stating his case, it must go according to what is there. And if the AVL is proving against him, it's a problem. And if there's no proof that he was assaulted, then it's a problem. But here's what I would like to end with on this, Linda. Having the confession being admitted, it does not necessarily mean that he is guilty at this point. It means the court can say the confession is admissible. But if there's anything else that the court can look at beside the confession, maybe the court might find in his favor. But I think on the confession part, it's a problem for me. He must bring something else that can assist him to take him out, because we've already dealt with this part and we need to check if there's anything else that he can bring that can assist him to be found not guilty.
Yeah, and I want us to then, Melusi, look at, the state seemingly wanting to point out the, conflicting versions based on what, his lawyer at the time, Thulani Mngomezulu, said versus what he is saying now on the stand. I mean, this is one critical moment during cross-examination. The test is whether or not there's consistency even in the story that you previously told. And now being confronted with appears to be conflicting versions, surely that, can be seen as something that will weigh against Bongani Ntanzi.
Yeah, what is important is that when you are putting a version as an attorney or a legal practitioner on behalf of the accused, the version, obviously, you've consulted with your client, but what we are usually trained to do is that you must make him to do an affidavit that states what his version is, so that when he goes on the witness stand and he says something different to what you as an attorney have put to the witnesses, at least there's something that the attorney can say, this is the version that I was given. Because now the issue is here. When Mr. Mngomezulu cross-examined with the version that I believe was given to him by the accused, the new attorney is coming in now. I wonder what was the preparation, because the preparation should have been in line with what was put before, so that when he goes on the witness stand, he will then be saying what his attorney said. But sometimes it does happen that the accused will say something to the attorney, and when he goes on the witness dock, he says something different. Now that becomes a problem for the accused, because he will say something that is hugely inconsistent with what was put. And the prosecutor will say, but I was here and your attorney was here. He put this version, and you never stopped the attorney in court to say, no, that's not how the version is. And he was allowed, as your attorney, to put the version. Now you are coming to say something different. Now, if the inconsistency is hugely problematic, it becomes a problem for the accused as defense, and he might be found guilty because of that, because it might be issues that point to his guilt or his innocence.
Yeah. How important is it for Bongani Ntanzi at this point, Melusi, to bring in evidence that will give more credibility to the allegations of assault? What is it, in other words, can he bring that will substantiate that indeed this assault took place? I was coerced to sign these already compiled statements through assault. So at this particular point, given the fact that what we're hearing now is possibly what we heard during the trial within a trial, and in the trial within a trial, we know that the ruling there was that these statements were made freely, voluntarily, and without undue influence. The court did not necessarily go into the details around what it makes of the assault allegations. But of course, that is not the end of it. At the end of the trial, it can still change its mind. So what I'm asking is what still needs to come, or what can come that will help Bongani Ntanzi throw these confession statements out?
Yeah, when it comes to the issue of assault, it would have been assisting the accused if he had something tangible. For example, there's a JD8 or a document that shows the proof of his injuries at the time when he was taken by the police or when his confession was made. But obviously, the police, in their job, they can do two things. They can, one, ensure that before you make a confession, you're taken to the doctor to prove that nothing was done to you and it was made freely and voluntarily. Even in situations where you have to point out, for example, a
All right, we seem to have lost Melusi Xulu there, but it gives us an opportunity now to take a quick ad break, because when we come back, we get into the confession statement that was made before Colonel Rapadu. That's on the 19th of June 2020. So stay tuned. Welcome back, and thank you for choosing to stay with us. You're still watching Inside the Courtroom, the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial wrap. I'm Linda Nisi. Now, the state went into the alleged confession statement of Bongani Ntanzi. Now, in the confession, Ntanzi essentially details how he was called for a job to allegedly kill Senzo Meyiwa, and that it was allegedly at the behest of the soccer star's then girlfriend, that singer Kelly Khumalo. Now, the confession statement also, among others, mentions his co-accused who allegedly acted with him in furtherance of this alleged plot. To continue this conversation, I'm still joined by my guests, Itu Mukwena, as well as Melusi Xulu, who have been helping me break down this particular evidence. Itu, let me come back to you. It's quite important, right, when you look at the issue of Dr. Tlhoko. And I want us to get into the evidence of Dr. Tlhoko before we continue with these confession statements, because Dr. Tlhoko is a dentist, right? So in your view, how do you then center his evidence when, in fact, he focuses on teeth and not necessarily on other physical parts of the patient?
Thank you, Munisi. I think this was also addressed during the evidence of Dr. Tlhoko, where he says that I am trained as a dentist, right, to examine patients. He says that we examined Ntanzi from waist up. And he says that, yes, he was there for a dental assessment, but when we do a dental assessment, we do also check other things. And if we find something, then we refer him to somebody else, to a general practitioner or to a specialist that's going to deal with whatever issues that we are finding on him. So just because he is just a doctor, a dentist, it doesn't mean that he was specifically just looking at his teeth. He did also look at other areas of his body, and he was able to make a recommendation, or rather form an opinion of whether he was tortured or could have been tortured in the last 3 days before coming to him. And he says that, well, if there was a bruise, I was going to be able to see it. If there was a love bite, for example, I was going to be able to see it. But there was nothing in this regard. I could not see anything. So I don't know how Ntanzi is going to be able to argue that. Already he doesn't know that evidence. So I don't think he's going to be able to put anything forward to argue that evidence.
Melusi, from a strategic point, from a defense perspective, do you think that this particular evidence is damning to Ntanzi? And do you think that perhaps he may need to bring in his own expert, because Dr. Tlhoko may be regarded as an expert? Does he then need to bring his own expert who will then counter what Dr. Tlhoko said, or other medical records, for example, from his employer?
Yeah, as a defense, I think it will help. As I was trying to say before, I had a problem with the network, that he has his own way of proving that he was assaulted. But, this was 6 years ago, more or less. So I don't know where he will get there to say, look, on this particular date, it can be shown that I had injuries on my face or elsewhere, because the police, Linda, are also very smart. They will be able to, maybe, I'm not saying that's what happened in this case, they will be able to do things that will not show any injury, physical injury, but they will ensure that you are injured to be able to give evidence the way they want. But when you go to the doctor, it will not show. So I think the problem is, at this stage, it's difficult to say here's a physical injury or proof of a physical injury. The police assaulted me. So it's it's stuck between a rock and a hard place. So I think that is why we always say, when you are with the police, make sure that you have your own attorney, and ensure that when a confession is to be made, your attorney is there as well, so that at least we don't have this back and forth. We have a trial within a trial, and it's proven that you did make the confession without any undue influence, and then you come to testify at the trial, and you still go back and say you were assaulted, but by then it's too late to prove.
Yeah, Itu, let's now focus on the pro forma, right? It's an important document which would indicate whether or not Bongani Ntanzi was read his rights. You know, it's important not only in the confession before Rapadu, but also in the confession before Magistrate Vivian Cronje. One of the other things that he says is that, well, the police had my ID documents, so they would have had, you know, my personal information easily. They did not need to get that information from me.
Sorry, Linda. True. True, Linda. If truly the police had Ntanzi's information, they wouldn't have to ask him anything. And Ntanzi says that Rapadu had my ID. And if you look at the pro forma, the ID is incorrect on that document. So which it doesn't make sense that Rapadu is going to put in an incorrect ID when he's looking at the document. That to me says that Ntanzi gave him that ID number. He was not looking at an ID document. And Ntanzi might have tried to change his ID a little bit because we know when people confess, they're not going to give you 100% of what actually happened. They will try belittle their involvement or exaggerate the involvement depending on what kind of a picture they are trying to paint. But at this instant, when I look at that pro forma and what information it actually has about Ntanzi, where it says that Ntanzi, you were wearing an Impala jacket, you were wearing blue jeans, and according to your conflicting versions, at what point does Rapadu get this information? Because originally you had told us that Gininda pre-populated this statement, right? How would have Gininda known that you're going to wear these clothes at this time? How would have Gininda known that you guys are going to finish around 11 o'clock when you do this confession? It's highly impossible. And if you are saying Rapadu is the one who was actually writing out these things, it still doesn't make sense, Ntanzi.
Yeah, Itu, while I still have you here, I mean, the confession statement is also just a binding document, binding the deponent, right? And with Rapadu's confession statement, it's the first time that the police say or claim that this is where we got the names of accused number 3, 4, and 5.
Correct, Nisi. Again, it doesn't make sense that the police are going to say that we knew nothing of Mapisa, we knew nothing of accused number 5 and accused number 3. But here are the names written in a confession. And the police are already saying that they don't even try and say that we showed you a picture of accused number 3 in a boardroom on the day that you got arrested, because we only got that picture later on in the after you had given us accused number 3's name. And for me, I find it very interesting when accused number Ntanzi meets up with his friend before he goes to court. And his friend then asked him, that's not, I think it's Butelezi asked him, Horena, what actually happened? Why are you here? Ntanzi also brings up another name, which is Mapisa, and said, I am arrested because my friends and I, Abu Mapisa, went to a party and we ended up injuring Senzo. Here's another name. Now, this is coming from a different witness already. So it doesn't make sense that these names would have been discovered when they were discovered by the police at that time. For Ntanzi to say that he did not give any information, where did the police actually get this information? And Ntanzi's response to the where or how did the police get this information, it's very interesting for me because he says he doesn't know. Go and ask the police themselves. The police have already given us a very reasonable reason as to why they have these names, which is you. So you are not giving us any explanation at all as to how the names ended up there. And these are your friends.
Yeah, Melusi, help us make sense of this legally. You know, here is the evidence that it is talking about. in relation to the names of his co-accused coming up in the confession statement. There were allegations that there was a picture that was shown to him in a boardroom meeting, but the response there was that at that particular time, the police did not know that the co-accused were involved. They did not have their names in sight. It all goes back to, you know, how in the first place they even got to know about Ntanzi as well as Sibiya's alleged involvement. Now, my question is around the fact that he says he does not even know Carlos, right? This is a man that the allegation is that he entered the Khumalo home with. Carlos was the alleged gun-wielding intruder. He allegedly fired the 2 shots. And it's coming from this particular statement. How then does he bolster his testimony in that I don't know this person and I couldn't have given his name in a confession statement in a way that is quite credible and will help him in fighting this confession statement?
Yeah, I think I want to agree with Ito in this case. Yes, I'm more on the side of the defense, but the problem is the names and how the offense occurred could have not just been created by anyone. Yes, the are parties who are notorious for just putting pieces in a confession through their ways. So yes, the problem is other than from him, how could they been able to get these names and the name of Carlos and where it happened? So the problem becomes in him defending these statements. But maybe I'm repeating it for the second time that, you know, at this stage, again, it's difficult to really challenge a confession when they've already been admitted. It's just that he has to come and explain more in detail, which is what he did also when it was a trial in the trial. So the problem is either than from him, it's only him who could come with these names. And even when he went to the magistrate, I think in Boksburg, subject to correction, it's only him who could come with the names and the events and how the offense occurred. So now he has to defend himself against himself, and that's how we see it.
Yeah, and I mean, the issue again of the names becomes quite important. But in this particular instance, ultimately it all boils down to the fact that he is implicating himself as the intruder in line with the allegations by the state that he, along with the gun-wielding intruder, pardon me, entered the Khumalo home.
Yes, like I said, it's him who implicated himself, and he says he was there with Carlos, and it shows that that is what the state is alleging. But now the problem is he comes and say, no, I did not make a statement. But my only issue is that, again, you know, at the end of the day, unless it comes with something different to what he alleged on the trial in the trial, it's very difficult to move himself away from what has already been admitted as a confession that is admissible to be used in court. So now the problem is, how does he move himself away from the confession? It's very difficult. And I think right now he's stuck with his confession. That is why it's always better to remain silent until you come to court and you're advised by your attorney what's the next step to do.
All right, let's quickly take an ad break. When we come back, we get into the alleged confession statement before Magistrate Vivian Cronia. That statement taken on the 24th of June 2020. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and thank you for choosing to stay with us. Remember, we're still running our poll question for this week, and we want to know from you whether you think the alleged confession statements of the alleged intruder Bongani Ntanzi will withstand scrutiny. We have those options on your screen. Number 1 is yes, there is no other alternative version. Number 2 is no, there are too many inconsistencies. And number 3, you're waiting for the end of the testimony. So scan that QR code. You can already see some of the results trickling in. 7% of you saying yes, and about 65% of you saying there are too many inconsistencies. I want us to take a look at the messages that you've been sending through. We have a tweet from Mark K. Twain, who says there have been about 20 material telltale instances that show that disputed confession statements were not made by the accused. Hashtag Senzo Meyiwa made a trial. We did, of course, also ask you to send through your WhatsApp messages. And on WhatsApp, we have Annie who says, hello, Linda. Court cases are decided on law in competent courts. The state's case is indefensible. So those are the messages that are coming through from some of the people that have been following this case. So make sure you continue sending us all those messages and scanning the QR code on your screen. All right, so let's continue here. The state shifted gears later in the week, entering the confessions of Magistrate Vivian Grenier. Now, this is the second confession statement that Bongani Ntanzi allegedly deposed on the 24th of June 2020, just 5 days after his first one. Now, it's the state's case that the present in the room, was Ntokozo Mjiako, who was allegedly representing Bongani Ntanzi. But Ntanzi, however, denies ever appointing Mjiako to represent him. The state also looked at the confessions, highlighting what it believes is a thread that connects witness testimonies and what Ntanzi had allegedly said on the confessions. Take a look.
When we got to the house, he pulled out a firearm.
Uma singena endlini wakhipha isibhamu. I don't know about that, my lord.
He ordered everyone to lie down and demanded phones and money.
I don't know about that, my lord.
When we were dealing with the confession made before Lieutenant Colonel Rapaju, we referred you to the evidence of people who were in the house, in particular Ms. Zandile Kumalo and Jumelo Mdlala, who testified that two intruders entered the house and that one was armed and had dreadlocks, and the second intruder was taller than the armed intruder, and they identified you as the second intruder.
At the Kumalos, they alleged, my lord, that a person that entered had a beard. I did not have a beard in 2014.
Now, the state also looked into the evidence relating to the firearm and shots fired in the Kumalo home.
During this intense scuffle, Senzo took a chair and hit Carlos with it.
I don't know about that, my lord. And I was not even there.
It appeared as if he wanted to prevent Carlos from taking whatever he wanted to take.
Still proceed.
From whatever he was opening.
My lord, I don't know about that.
Kelly Kumalo was the one who directed Carlos where the thing was which he wanted to take.
My lord, I don't know about that.
During the scuffle, Carlos fired 2 shots.
My lord, I don't know about that.
We have, when we dealt with the confession before Lieutenant Colonel Rapaju, referred to the fact that the ballistic expert, Lieutenant Colonel Mangena, testified that 2 shots were fired.
My lord, that was said by Mangena and not by Ntanzi, because I did not write a statement and I know nothing about what you are reading out to me.
And that both the ballistic expert, Lieutenant Colonel Mangena, and the pathologist, Dr. Steenkamp, confirmed that Mr. Senzo Meyiwa was shot in the chest.
That's what they said. I know nothing, and I was not a part of that.
All right, let's continue our conversation. I'm still joined by Itu Mukwena, who's a commentator regularly following this trial, as well as legal analyst Melusi Ulu. Itu, let me start with you again. The similarities that the state wants to draw between the confession statement as well as, you know, the witness testimonies. Talk to us about that.
Yes, Mnisi, the corroboration of Ntanzi's confession. So firstly, we have witnesses that say that there were 2 intruders that came in. Ntanzi says himself and Carlos went into the Kelly Kumalo home. They have described the two intruders as one was taller than the other one, and the other one was a little bit bigger than the taller one, right? And Ntanzi also says that he confirms for us that Carlos is actually Nube, accused number 3. Right. We also know from ballistic experts that there were 2 shots that were fired in that house, and Danzi also confirms that there were 2 shots that were fired in that house. Ballistic also confirms that those shots came from a certain gun, which has been matched to a gun that Mr. Nube once used, I think a year or so after committing that same crime. And Nube has also admitted that, yes, that was my gun. We are still awaiting the ballistic expert from the defense, Mr. Dave, to provide his report on the same evidence. We have not received that as yet, so we cannot speak on that. But from where I am standing, there's also people that were not in the house. So people from outside that said, we saw a tall man, somebody about 1.8 meters long, around the age of Ntanzi. I think they were off by a few months and a few, not 2 centimeters off, describing who Ntanzi. So that is also corroborated, Nisi. So I don't know. I don't know how we go about this, or how we still believe Ntanzi did not confess, or we did not get this information from Ntanzi, because we have witnesses that were in the house and people that have nothing to do with this case that have confirmed that they saw 2 people come in.
Yeah, Melusi, help us, make sense of this, because I believe the state is going towards the tail end of its cross-examination, so almost building a thread to say, we look at your confession statement, there are individual witnesses who have testified to this effect. Itu now makes reference to the statement of Tabang Makeleni, a deceased witness whose statement has been quite contentious in that courtroom, giving a description which the state believes matches the description of Ntanzi. But, when you speak about issues around the ballistic expert, this is expert evidence that, at this particular point, also is disputed in this court. But the state witnesses are adamant that the gun, again, matches the gun that was linked to the Regime Mohlala case back in 2015. So how do we then circle this moment? Where do we place it in relation to the overall testimony and the overall evidence against Bongani Ntanzi?
What is important is the corroboration of his confessions, because there are 2, and the testimony that has been given by Zandile Kumalo, Tumelo, and Twala as well, and the witness that was deceased, or is deceased rather. So now we're looking at connecting the dots, and we're saying, how could it be possible that a confession can also corroborate what has been stated by the witnesses? And then it goes to prove that actually we have direct evidence of the witnesses that saw, when we have a confession, and it becomes, a high mountain to climb for Ntanzi to prove that, the evidence against him is weak, because the state must just prove beyond reasonable doubt. So I'm saying, as it stands, because of his confession and the cooperation of the witness statements and what they've given in courts, it becomes a problem. Yes, there are issues that we've stated before, but what is important is that the state must prove its case beyond reasonable doubt. Not to say I'm putting the cart before the horse right now, but I'm saying he's in a position that is quite indefensible.
Yeah. How easy or difficult will it be for the state to accept, or rather the court to accept, that these are statements that were already compiled before Bongani Ntanzi affixed his signatures on them, given the kind of detail that they reveal? Again, it is part of the reasons, or the details that are given there are part of the reasons why the state even says Kelly Khumalo is the mastermind.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned it before, that I kind of have a problem with the fact that if they're saying there's a mastermind, they've not arrested her, or she's not part of this case, but the state has stated that they will deal with that once they finalize this case. So we'll be watching on that. But with regards to whether the statement was already pre-written before he signed, we had a magistrate who is actually qualified to take a confession in Boksburg, and she came and she says, yes, she recorded. Remember, she recorded the confession, but it was inadmissible because she did not ask the accused. But she was there with his attorney. Again, there is an issue about Mjiako. I so wish that he can be brought to come and also just confirm what his position is. But the confession was admissible. So the problem is, at the end of the day, the confession, let's just stick to the Boksburg one. It was made before a magistrate and there were no issues of injuries and so forth. So whenever you say you're disputing a confession, I as an attorney, I would rather have evidence to prove that you were coerced to make the confession, because once you say you did not make the confession, you were actually coerced to sign, then I need proof as an attorney so that I can be able to defend you. My problem with both of his confession, we don't have that.
Yeah, and that's why I ask, how difficult will it be or easy it will be, given that just the sheer level of detail that those statements give. I mean, if we're going to say these statements are statements that were compiled prior to him even affixing his signature, because some of the allegation is that it was also not read back to him. When the court evaluates what he says on the stand versus the information that those statements give, will it be easy for it to accept that Bongani Ntanzi is telling the truth?
I don't think it will be easy. I mean, the fact that the court has already, Linda, accepted the statements, it's not easy for the court to come back and change its mind on it. That is why I'm saying maybe, although it will be difficult, maybe the court, because the court is also allowed, Linda, to call its witness once the evidence has been done, and the court is allowed to say, at least to clarify this point, I need someone who will come and assist me in this. So that is where I come in with calling him Giaco. Once they've done with testimony or the defense testimony, I would love the court to call Giaco, at least on this point, to prove that he was there, he was the attorney, and I think he's been an attorney on record for other cases or other causes as well. So that will assist us to know what his role was, because my only problem maybe with I would say the Giaco situation is the fact that an attorney that assists the client to make a confession, rather you do that, I'm not saying that's what he did or didn't do, but I'm saying in general, rather you do that knowing that at least if your client makes a confession, there's a certain deal he might get out of it, or he might be a section 2 for a witness and he might get something. There's no attorney who will just throw in a deep end, but that can be clarified if he can come and explain his role. Then the courts will be in a position to look at it holistically on this point, whether the confession, also using Giaco's role, was made properly. But the court has already accepted it in the trial. I suppose they will just be making sure about the whole explanation, whether Giaco was really the attorney or not. So there are issues there and there, but at the end of the day, I'm sticking to the fact that, the court has already admitted it, but there are also other issues that might come up, hopefully, but maybe on appeal, if the defense is adamant that the court did not really apply its mind on these notions or on these issues, maybe that can be dealt with in the appeal. But for now, the court has accepted the confessions.
Yeah, Melusi raises the issue of a deal, possibly being there. There's no attorney that will, make their client or throw their client in the deep end to just accept that they committed the crime. We heard in this court previously that there was possibly a deal on the table, although that, again, is another issue that is disputed.
Yes, Linda, and it's unfortunately it's an issue that we don't have a complete view of because it could have been a confidential issue between Ntanzi and his attorney. So it would be great if Giaco can come, but for me personally, I don't think it's on the court's hands to call Giaco because Giaco coming would be there to prove that to prove Ndanzi's case. So the only person that can call him Diako is obviously Ndanzi. But also Ndanzi is not the only a 204 witness that we know about. We know of another witness that was supposed to be a 204 witness, but then went and changed his whole testimony when he came to come testify. So there is a lot of inconsistencies in this trial. So I think credibility is going to play a very important role because people are able to just change statements as and when they wish.
All right, let's take another quick ad break because when we come back, we look ahead. It's going to be another short week, so we'll look at what is still to come. So don't go anywhere. Back. Let's look ahead now and, of course, get into the conversation in terms of what exactly to expect this coming week. Itu, the confession statements are still likely to continue. It is a big part of the evidence against Bongani Ntanzi. So the state will sort of want to make sure that it closes all loopholes.
Yes, Linda, they will want to address all the different versions that he has given us. They will want to corroborate anything they are able to corroborate. They will bring in cell phone evidence, AVL. They'll bring it. They are going to throw everything at Ntanzi at this point because we are reaching the end. And as we all know, these confessions are conditionally accepted. So, should Ntanzi be able to bring something new, something new, add onto what he had already said in the trial within the trial, maybe the court might reconsider, right? But as far as we have come, we have not received anything new, but we have received something different. He keeps changing his versions. And his worst mistake for me is the fact that he's not giving reasons as to why he's changing his versions, and he is not giving an explanation as to why am I changing now. So for me, that's just saying I'm just manufacturing my version as and when we go, Mr. Baloy.
Yeah, and Melusi, I mean, the issue around versions is obviously the one that the state will want to take advantage of, right? If it feels there is a new version, it then points to a whole list of other versions that would have been previously put there to ensure that they strike right at the heart of the credibility of Ntanzi.
Yeah, Linda, I can tell you one thing. When I was a prosecutor some years back, and I would have a witness or rather an accused that is saying a version that is entirely different to what was put by his attorney, and he keeps bringing different versions, I would make sure that I make a meal out of that so that at least it can be clear at the end that the credibility of the accused in his defense cannot be trusted by the court. And I will ensure that if the case has been proven beyond reasonable doubt, I state that in an emphatic way, and I ensure that the versions that he puts show that he cannot be trusted. So it becomes a problem if you're an accused, you have different versions. This is why preparation with your client or rather you as an accused with your attorney is very important so that you can have one consistent version and it doesn't differ too much to what you'll be saying in the witness doc. So I believe that the prosecution will make a huge meal out of that. And also his alibi and so forth, those things are going to be important for the state.
Yeah, let's look at the future of these confession statements. His testimony, one would say, is basically a foundation of what's to come. From here, the expectation is that there'll be corroboration from any witness that he may bring. Do you think there has been, so far, where the confession statements are concerned, solid foundation that could help him have these confession statements thrown out?
As it to say, then I agree with her completely. There's nothing new that we've seen so far, and there's nothing that he's saying reports that is clear. It's like a repeat of the trial in the trial. He was given an opportunity to deal with the confessions and challenge them, And obviously, according to the magistrate, rather to the judge, he couldn't. For example, Linda, I believe that he says that in October 2014, when this alleged offense occurred, he was at Kwanongoma. I think he was paying amalobolo to his girlfriend or fiance then. Why can't he just bring at least 2 or 3 people? Yes, sometimes photos cannot be seen, but nowadays in the social media days, we do have those evidences. He's not giving us something tangible on that alone. So it becomes a problem when you're on a trial now, you're in a witness dock, you are giving your testimony in a confession that is already admissible, but still you do not have anything new that you are bringing to say these confessions cannot be believed or be true because I have evidence that I was not in First Loras. I was at Kwanongoma, and during that time I was paying Lobolo. Even my fiance can come and testify, or my wife can come and testify. So this case is up to him. Does he have anything that he can assist us to say we should not believe the confessions?
Yeah, and
That is only him.
yeah, and just before we close, I mean, I'm interested on the issue around the preparation that you mentioned of a witness who is an accused person who takes the stand. You know, one would say some other accused persons are not new to, you know, courtrooms and how court processes flow, and would not necessarily know how to respond when they are being cross-examined. Do you find that with the answers that Bongani Ntanzi gives, and like you highlight the issue with the versions and the conflicting versions, that most of it can be attributed to the fact that, I mean, it's his first time being arrested?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with the fact that it's his first time, but the court does not really concern itself with the fact that maybe this is your 7th case or your 4th case. The court will look at the evidence. So it's up to the accused to make sure that when he and his attorney are preparing, they are preparing for every outcome. Well, it's up to him and his attorney. So I'm not saying they did not prepare, but I'm saying it will be shown that maybe there's some instances where it shows that they could have, you know, had a strategy to deal with certain issues so that the outcome does not show that his case is not is indefensible, right? So yes, it's his first time in a case like this, but at the end of the day, the court is concerned with the evidence. And if you are showing that you're not a credible witness in your case, unfortunately, the court will decide against you if the state is proving its case beyond reasonable doubt.
All right, Melissa Kulu as well as Itumukwena, thank you very much for your insights on this particular episode. I want us to take a look at the poll results now. You'd recall that at the beginning of the show, we asked whether you think the alleged confession statements will withstand scrutiny. A whopping 72% of you saying there are simply too many inconsistencies. So 4% of you said yes, there's no other version. 72% of you saying there are too many inconsistencies, and 24% saying we're waiting for the end of the trial. So interesting numbers coming through on today's show. It seems a lot of you believe the confession statements may be found wanting at the end of the trial. But of course, Bongani Ntanzi returns on Tuesday to continue with his cross-examination by the state. And that means you and I will see each other again next week for another installment of Inside the Courtroom, the Senzo Meyiwa Murder Trial Wrap. Until then, have a good one.